Unfortunately, not many people know who you are or what happened to you because your story, quite frankly, has been, I don't want to use the word covered up, but perhaps not given the amount of attention that it deserves. So, can you tell us who you are and what happened to you to give people a degree of understanding of why we're chatting today?
No problem. So my name is Sal Grover, and I am the founder and CEO of Giggle, a female-only social network that was inspired in part by my previous career. So I moved from Australia to Hollywood when I was 24 to write movies. That's what I wanted to do. And I got into the industry relatively quickly. It took about 15 months, I think, for me, just under thereabouts, to sell my first script. And so from there, I was able to get an agent and manager and a visa so I could like properly live in the country. And my visa was very specific. Like I could only make money selling screenplays. So I didn't really have a lot of freedom. And sort of by that point, like 25, 26 years old, I didn't kind of realize what situation I was getting myself into of giving up sort of a lot of freedoms or a lot of choice. And my visa was connected to my agents, and I had two male agents, two male managers. And so, yeah, getting into the industry was pretty easy. But once I was in it, it was an absolute nightmare. So this is pre Me Too Hollywood. This is like 2010. It all sort of started 2011. It started to get really bad. Basically, I mean, I was in rooms with producers, directors, male executives. There was just sexual harassment and assault aplenty. It honestly became something that I dealt with on a near daily basis. There's not that many female screenwriters, like compared to how many men there are. There are women in the industry, but there is significantly more men. So when there are women screenwriters, it just you stand out a little bit, or for in my experience, not good reasons. And so I just sort of I fought against it for such a long time. Like when the first assault ever happened, I told my representation, and they just didn't care. They just told me to go and write a great script, and it would be all fine. And I didn't want to ever be in a room with this man ever again. So I didn't, and it was my professional reputation that was affected by that. And so this kind of sort of just kept happening, and I just sort of fell into a deeper pit of depression. Eventually, I couldn't write. I was out of money. I mean, life was just going really, really badly. So eventually in 2018, I actually just came home for a holiday and some much needed family time, and then ended up staying a bit longer because I went into therapy to sort of just recover from everything, because I was a shell of a person. And during therapy, my therapist was telling me, she was like, you need a strong female support network in your life. And so my mum and I spoke about this, like every night we'd like have a glass of wine. I'm a whiskey drinker. And it was my mum who came up with the idea. She was like, what if we created an app? And part of the inspiration for that was that, well, her idea, sorry, was create an app for women. And part of the inspiration was is that when everything was going really, really bad for me, I moved to New York for a bit, and I had to find a room to rent. And I went on all of the normal sites and apps, and all of these guys would contact me going, do you want a boyfriend as well? Or you can live here rent free if you walk around naked. And I was just like, can there be one area of my life that doesn't have this sort of, behavior in it? I was dealing with it at work. I was like, I'm just doing this most mundane, horrible task, and it's still there. So we were going to just make a roommate app for women, and then we were like, well, hang on, there's other areas, and there's like, what about this like sort of strong female support network? Like, imagine if you could just have that like in the palm of your hand whenever you needed it, to be able to talk to women all over the world. So basically, we just started developing the idea. We created a working demo of it. We got app developers and investors and all of that kind of stuff, and it was just sort of excited, and everything was great and positive. And then we put it on the App Store and Google Play just as we were like getting ready to launch, just to iron out any bugs. And do some testing with, like, honestly, a handful of women around the world knew about it. All the security wasn't in place yet. And somehow trans rights activists, who I didn't know there was such a thing, discovered it and made it go viral, calling me trans and the whole company transphobic, because to be able to get onto the app, we have security in the form of a selfie for people, for so that anyone who goes on basically has to take the selfie, and if you're male you get denied, and if you're female you get on the app. And I've come to find out that trans activists have a huge problem with this, because part of their ideology is that you can't tell if someone's a man or a woman by looking at them. So I had absolutely no idea that this sort of nonsense existed, because I mean, I don't think any sane person could argue that the easiest way to tell if someone is male or female is just look at them, just look at their face. We all know. I mean, this is a basic human skill from, like, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So yeah, so I sort of got thrust into this just crazy sort of culture war of gender ideology that I never expected, and have since been called a bigot and a transphobe pretty much daily, and cancelled, like, very much. Like, when people say cancel culture doesn't exist, I mean, I've literally been experiencing it for 3 years now. And so now we're at the stage that we've kept the app has continued to grow, and we're just so that everyone knows in context if they were to go and download it. It's actually in pieces at the moment because we are renovating it and sort of making it better and adding a website version. And so through sheer hard work, we've been able to keep this growing in spite of media backlash that have all sided with trans activists and just utter lies spread about us. So in summary, I feel like I've spent my entire professional life fighting some sort of very toxic male behavior.
Yeah, and I don't even know where to start with that. That's so weird, because it's like, I'm a woman, but you're not, and you're demonstrating this really weird, like, with all the nasty bitchiness of femininity, with the pushy, overbearing power hungriness. That's just so weird. But look,
well, are you referring to the trans activists?
Sorry?
Are you saying that about the trans activists?
Yeah. Like,
Well,
that's
honestly, I honestly don't see any femininity in them whatsoever.
Yeah.
Other, like, they have the performance of makeup and
Yeah.
their clothing, but
a
they're
parody of this
yes,
idea of the worst aspects of femininity, perhaps, would be
yes,
a better way
yeah,
of articulating it.
exactly. Like, their behavior is I mean, and to be fair, like, it's not like typical, not everyday man behavior in a lot of contexts either. It's like, I'm not someone who's going to sit and ever demonize all men or anything like that, but there is a sort of a toxic behavior that that does exist and is exhibited very, very clearly in these men who claim to be women.
And I really want to dive into that, but there are so many trains of thought that are going on with me right now. And one of them is, can you tell the interesting story about your dealings with the media?
Yes. So, oh gosh, which one in particular? Because there's been so many. Like, just even one the one that's the most recent in my mind is actually an article in the New Zealand Herald, came out over the weekend, and it was all about inclusive language, and about how, what, people should use terms like birthing parent and uterus havers and all of this nonsense. And it just referenced me. It was just Sal Grover in Australia who has fought back against this, but she misgenders people on Twitter and has been accused of being being transphobic. And I was like, you didn't even contact me for a comment about this. Like, they actually since have, and I've had them sort of edit the article to sort of not defame me like they have. But this has been pretty constant. I mean, in Australia alone, there's a group of journalists in Sydney, a group of guys who absolutely hate me and have gone after me. Just even recently, one of them did a tweet saying that I should never be called a mother. I should only be referred to as a transphobe. I mean, just utter nonsense, purely because I say what a woman is. If you had told me 3 years ago that this would be something I'd be dealing with, I would not have believed you. I would have thought you were insane.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure you've heard of that. Apparently, I haven't seen it yet, but there's a chap who's done a video on what is a woman, where he goes around and just asks people.
Yeah.
And apparently, everyone just sits there stumped. And
Yeah,
what?
so it's become
How do
this.
we get? I mean, how did we get here? Seriously,
Well,
rhetorically, because
yeah. I
that's
mean,
a 2 hour interview right there.
yeah. I mean, it's how did we get here? It's almost everybody has a different opinion on that. And in terms of how did saying what a woman is become such a sort of controversy? It's because most of this stuff has been done in stealth. That's what a lot of people don't realize. The laws have been changed in stealth against us. And preface it all by saying these laws affect men as well, because these laws are doing is they're making it that no one can acknowledge what they see with their own eyes, and no one can have free speech or free thought. That's not a specific women's issue. This is everyone in society.
Yeah.
But the people in sort of everyday life that it's affecting even more on this next level, it's women, because when completely changing the definition of a woman, and so saying that the men who say they're women have to come into women's spaces, women's sport, that changes our lives completely. You know, the idea that I could go to a bathroom or a change room and there could be a man in there is terrifying. What's more terrifying is that no decent man would ever go in.
No.
The only men who would go in are doing so because they have no problem with violating women's boundaries. So the moment there's a man in that room, you know he's not a good one.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part of it. And you know, if we say this we are called by the media, we're called bigots and transphobes. And they're, especially in Australia right now, they're trying to suppress this as much as they can. And you feel like a conspiracy theorist saying this. Like you feel like you're wearing a tinfoil hat, but it's happening. It's happening in real time every single day.
Yeah. Look, I remember reading Orwell.
Yeah.
In grade 10, and when O'Brien's, is torturing the hell out of Winston Smith, and 2 + 2 = 5. Like, say it, say it. And I genuinely remember thinking to myself, like, this could kind of, like, I understood it conceptually, and I was gripped by that amazing book. But I kind of thought, well, this could never happen. Like, you would never actually get people that would require you to distort reality to believe a narrative over that. And
I was only actually thinking about
it's genuinely happening.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about that book the other day, and the 2 + 2 = 5, and I was like, if Orwell had made the decision of, instead of 2 + 2 = 5, it was men or women, would people have believed it less? Like, would people have gone, oh, that's just too far-fetched?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because that's the danger of it, I think, just for all of society, that if you can be made to believe that men are women, and you're forced to believe that, and sort of you have to succumb to that, well, then you can be forced to believe anything. That's like, it really is an assault on reality.
Absolutely. And that is precisely what's happening. And that's, I've articulated that to a couple of people, and I get negative responses. But let's dive into something. And I just, in the really quick conversation I had just before we recorded this, I just bounce things off you. Okay. I don't need validation. I'm happy for you to tell me that I'm wrong or anything else like that. Believe me, like, having a wife and 2 daughters, it's
you're used to it.
It's far further, of course.
Fantastic.
But I think in some ways, now, feminism is a hard thing. I suppose the first thing I should do is go into definitions. Now, feminism is a hard thing to define. Okay, no, please,
yes,
go ahead.
Yes and no. I mean, just at the end of the day, at its just most basic level, feminism is just about women having equal, like a seat at the table, politically and socially and economically. Yeah. Because we didn't for such a long time, and still in many, many places in the world, women don't. So that's at its most basic. It's just women having those equal rights as men, and then also acknowledging that there are some contexts where there needs to be female specific rights, and that's because of pregnancy and maternity type things and motherhood that only happen to women, which is a controversial thing to say.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Why is that controversial?
I know. But it's just that those that there are sort of certain protected rights in that context. So that's at its core what feminism is, and so most people don't sort of disagree with that.
No.
There's then lots of different interpretations of it, obviously, of course, because there is with everything. But so that there are feminists, there's not some, and I'm one of them, who are critical of what sort of mainstream feminism is today, what the accepted version is, which is this sort of pornified sex work is work, very sort of objectifying women, but it's it's about that's being sold as female empowerment and women's choice, and it's like okay, I see what you were trying to do there, but there's only one demographic that's actually benefiting from this, and it's not women. So but that's the accepted form of feminism in mainstream media, because of course it is. Like, because sex sells. The other form of feminism, which is really just sort of a lot of theory and bureaucracy and paperwork and getting into the details, not nearly as sexy, but significantly more important.
Look, and my take is there's nothing I disagree with in that. Look, I think if you don't extend equal opportunity to people, you're and this is even just on an economic sense, and of course we're more than just economic beings.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't allow not just women, anybody to have equal access and judge by merit, like can you do this task better? Are you interested in it? Do you have the capacity?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're an insane person, especially if you're running a business.
Yeah,
we come from a small business background, my family, and we were chasing the best person for the job. We just didn't care about anything else.
Yeah, I had that's the same background. Like, my parents were small business owners as well, and it was, yeah, I mean, there was lots of women in the workplace. I know what you're getting at, and like, so first I'll say, like, in terms of just the being in a room just to fulfill a quota, I've actually been in that situation. In Hollywood, they have these things called writers' roundtables, where there'll be a script, either a movie script or a TV script, that a writer has written, and that they basically, like, the studio or producers, whoever, want to just do like a punch up of like just some better lines here, maybe a better scene, blah blah blah. And rather than do like weeks of crazy long rewrites, they bring in a group of writers for a day, who have already read the script, and everyone sits around, goes through it, and throws out their ideas, and you get paid quite handsomely for the day. So the first time I did it, I was the only woman at the table. I was like, oh, this is sort of strange. And every time I said something, I was cut off, or my idea was rejected. But then 20 minutes later, a guy would say the same. One of the guys at the table would say that idea, and it was accepted. And I was like, okay, this is frustrating. But the money was good, so you left happy at the end of the day. And it happened the second time, and then the third time, and it was pretty quickly, after a few times, I was like, oh, I'm not there to give ideas. I'm there to just so that they can tick a box. And so I was like, my thought was, well, kind of, fine. I'm just going to sit here and say nothing and take your money. I'm not even going to give you my ideas to steal. I will literally just sit here and shut up. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of anything. So, no, it's not a nice feeling to be in the room just to fill a quota. I'd rather be there based on my merit, my ability.
Exactly.
But so
yeah, sorry.
That sort of stuff all comes from it's the wrong attempt to fix something that's wrong, which is that, like, I've also experienced, in my work, that by being female, you won't even be considered for it. And that's because, I've gone from Hollywood male dominated industry to tech male dominated industry. They just are. And there are, fine reasons behind why they are, but it's just, to try and get equal opportunity there when they don't want you to, some don't want you to have it. It is really difficult to navigate. So how do you then move up just based on talent, or or your ability, or whatever? It in hard work, it is really, really difficult. So I don't particularly know the solution to that. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. But the other one about, like, sort of feminism mixing up the roles of everyone. I get what you're saying in the sense that, like, there are a lot of men who are really, really confused of what they're supposed to do.
Exactly.
If especially, okay, so say if you are sort of from that era where you were taught to open doors and pay for the date and blah blah blah. As you sort of said, it was essentially about respect. And I think that being taught to be respectful of women is obviously not a problem. It's just sort of maybe how that respect is shown sort of evolves a little bit. I'm not someone who is bothered if a man opens a door for me, but I'd also open a door for a man if I got to the door first. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But if a man didn't open it, like if he was there first and didn't, I'd be like, oh, well, that was rude. But that's because it's just sort of evolved just to something that we both do. I don't like, so that's something that women have the responsibility for as well. And that it's just respecting each other.
I think it's even things like words, because, like, the concept of women as the weaker sex. Now, to a certain degree, that's true.
Physically, we are.
Yeah, you don't have the upper body strength, and as you know from, you were actually assaulted. You were saying, and reading stuff. There's been who've attempted to rape you. So, like,
yeah.
If push comes to shove, that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, if this guy goes, you know what, that's gonna happen.
Yeah, even on like a really light note, like my boyfriend and I have play thumb wars all the time. He wins, like, because he's got bigger hands than me.
Yeah.
He's significantly bigger and he's stronger, and it's funny, like, when you play sort of games like that. I mean, that's just how it is. I always say to people
So
when I'm having these like discussions these days, where I'm like, because it's about not allowing men to compete in women's sports. And I'm like, it's not that we love that we're not as physically strong. It's just how it is. Like, would the world be a better place if men and women were equally as physically strong and fast, etc.? Well, I don't think it would necessarily be a better place, because then you don't really have two distinct types of people. And there's a real reason why we have two distinct types of people. And basically it comes down to procreation. And the reason that women's bodies are different is all based around pregnancy and childbirth.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and to a certain degree behavior, to a certain degree behavior too. Now,
yeah, Helen Joyce, who wrote the book Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality, she says it best. She explains it so well. That there's, in terms of behavior, that there's a reason that women are sort of maybe more interested or better with babies. It's because just that makes sense. And there's a reason that men are better firefighters. It just makes sense. It doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions to the rules where women could be a good firefighter, and it doesn't mean that men can't help out with looking after babies. It's just there are some behaviors that exist for a reason, and it's not a good or a bad thing. It just kind of is.
Yeah, it's a pattern of reality, and precisely. But I mean, with that weaker, because when we say the weaker sense, and I think that that's part of the conceptual framework that's wrong, because like people think, okay, well, that means in every other sense as well, and that's just not true. Like, and look, it's even going back to and I use a biblical analogy, because it's something that even people in the West today who are raised secular, they kind of they don't understand, but they get the imagery. Now, when you look at that, when you look at Genesis, It's the most matriarchal story ever. Like Adam comes out looking like a complete and utter spastic. Like no, he does. Like seriously. So the first, like you have a human being, so someone who was like physiologically human. That's Adam, but he was conscious. And then you have like the first person who becomes conscious, who understands like everything, gets that, you know, the light goes on literally, was a woman, Eve. She's the first conscious human being. She draws consciousness out of Adam. He ends up being not as intelligent as her, and that's kind of like it's almost explicitly stated. He's he definitely, no, seriously, like, you know, read it. Like I'm not being ironic or flippant here. Like this is the interpretation as I understood and as I was trying to understand the Bible. So he comes out kind of like looking a bit dumb, and he comes out as like, you're supposed to be this cool protector. You're supposed to. He throws Eve under the bus. He throws her under the bus. He totally does. Like, you know, where's your courage? Where's your character? Who are you? Oh, look, it was the woman. Throws her under the bus straight away. And then they both get their various punishments. Like he's got to work. But the funniest one, and this just goes to show me that that God has a sense of humor. One of the things he is like, you will always desire your man, and childbirth will hurt like hell. but sort of that's expressing a pattern of reality. That's expressing that like men need women to pull consciousness out of them. They do. And you kind of like think of what happens in most relationships, especially when they're started young. You kind of like have this woman who's going, well, you're this dumb young boy now who's like good at lifting heavy things. And yes, I'm impressed by that, but like, this is who I need you to become. Okay. I need you to grow up.
Well, I mean, I would never sort of insult men by saying that all men are idiots until a woman walks into the room or into their life. I think that would be completely incorrect to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't say idiots, but we're not fulfilled.
No, I mean,
we're all we could be. Without,
I mean,
I just don't.
I disagree because to be honest, I think that it gives men a get out of jail free card of like for poor behavior, to blame it either on a woman or the absence of one. So I wouldn't be. I'm sort of just I'm not willing to do that. It's like we all have to grow up and become adults, but are there just some characteristics that seemingly more present in one sex than the other? Yeah, I mean, is it like sort of just fact at this point that women's or girls' brains develop at a faster rate than male brains and sort of mature mentally faster? Yeah. But from my understanding, most of that is because for most of history, we were mothers really, really young. So we had to we had to get our shit together. So there's just sort of, there are just really reality-based reasons behind it that none of them can be like, that are an excuse for poor behavior would be my baseline with it. It's like, you know, there's no excuse for women to behave poorly either in that context.
For me, it's a yes, but and so it's like, yes, I agree with what you just said. Fundamentally, what's wrapped up in that question is like, what is human flourishing? What does that look like? And does a person even know what's good for themselves and what they actually want / need? Because what you want may not be two different things. And the evidence that I point to at that is, look at our incredible rates now of suicide. It's worse for men, but it's worse for women. But look at the trans movement. You have all of these women who are telling themselves they don't need babies, they don't need men, they don't need any of this stuff. Their lives will be better if they're men, and they're chopping themselves up. Yeah. So that's not better. That's noticeably worse. Maybe, just maybe. Like, I'm not talking about like, and because people go, so are you saying that you need to force it? It's like, no, but maybe there should be this, at least this encouragement. And I try and do it with my girls, and they're really sneering, dismissive, but I go, hey, look, you know, because they're just like, oh yeah, as soon as they talk about their future, it's like, I'm going to do this, this, and this. You know, I'm going to have this role economically, and I'm going to work here. I'm going to do this and all. Great, fantastic, totally on board with that. Where's the family?
Yeah. Okay. So a few things with that. So first of all, you're completely right. The male suicide rates at the moment are horrible, and it's something that it's like all around the West. I don't know enough about it though, other than my only comment on that is that, like, let's fix it, because that is just horrible. In terms of, okay, so
but the women chopping themselves up, I think that's a sign of something too.
Pardon?
The women chopping themselves up, I think.
Oh yeah. So for women, what I would just absolutely hate to be a teenage girl right now. You have this sort of Instagram influencer culture of, and it's just, you know, this cosmetic procedures and over sexualization, posing, and just hardly any clothes.
Yeah.
And young girls are seeing this. They're seeing it, like, you know, thousands of times a day.
Totally.
And so, and just how objectified they are. And then, you know, then you've got OnlyFans. It's been introduced, and, you know, this encouragement of like turn 18 and create an OnlyFans account. And we hear these stories in the media of women making crazy amounts of money per month. They don't publicize this, most of the reality, which women making about $15 a month.
Sorry, what's an OnlyFans account?
OnlyFans is an app, and you're going to think I'm making this up. And it's, I constantly just go like, how do I get attacked for making an app for women to be able to connect with each other? But there is literally an app that's not under attack called OnlyFans that is for, I mean, it's for men or women to create their own account where they can then have paid subscribers. And it's basically just porn. Sometimes couples
OnlyFans, so people will pay you to
and they
get your gear off, or
and you get
whatever.
photos sent to you and all of this stuff. So there are women out there making like millions of dollars a year because of this, right? I just think it is a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to go in and undercut that market, like, you know, as tempting as it be.
Yeah, it's just a nightmare.
Sorry, people. Sorry.
But
It's a
so
no from me.
you have teenage girls that are seeing this Instagram OnlyFans way of life. And if every instinct in their body is saying no to that, which, you know, to be honest, most girls go, absolutely no way. They're terrified of that. And then they see this other side, which is you can escape womanhood completely, where you don't have to go and be sexualized. You can go and be treated like a man. It's just going to involve this surgery and these drugs, which is hormones and whatnot. And they're opting for that. When you actually read into like rapid onset gender dysphoria and what this social contagion that's happening, it actually makes perfect sense. And you can have nothing but sympathy for these girls that are going through it, because, you know, when push came to shove, I think a lot of us would have chosen this trans route, because it does seem like the better option of, instead of going and being just a sex object. Because there's even like the most famous prostitute of all time, Pretty Woman, there's literally a line in that movie that says, this is, you know, no one grows up saying, it's not the childhood dream of going and being a sex worker or prostitute, whatever you want to call it. It didn't exist until OnlyFans has sort of has started to create that as it becoming this childhood dream. It's just, I can't even describe how bad the zeitgeist is, I think.
But so, see, I see that as a downplaying of femininity. It's not that women aren't sexy and that, you know, men don't want to have sex.
Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being sexy or sex in general.
And I think I'm thinking this is the way. And please, it's not that I don't want to. It's not that I want to jump in. It's just that this thought will leave my head really quickly. It's downplaying femininity, because, like you said before, like, you know, the simple fact is biologically speaking, this is a pattern of reality. It doesn't matter whether we like it or not. We think it's fair or not, good or not. This is how things are. You know, women are the breeders and the makers. And I don't think feminism as an ism has ever really celebrated that. You know, it's always been like, oh, this woman succeeded as president. This woman did this. You know, where is the celebration of being of the feminine, of doing things that only women can do.
Okay, so okay,
It's not there.
You're not wrong in a sense. It's there's it depends where you look, because you can look in one area and see only that celebration that of women having babies, and that seems to be still all we're supposed to do, and then you can see the go and look in other places and it's sort of total sort of shame in that. So you are getting these conflicting messages constantly. I don't know if that's a feminism's problem, or actually sort of a media problem more than anything, because as I said, there's a certain type of feminism of sex sells that is significantly more popular in media. And so is it accurate feminism? No, but then accurate feminism sort of has to take responsibility for it.
Yeah. Well, and then you come down to who defines it. Like, so is it?
Yeah. But then, I think, you sort of, one of the things in this sort of moment in time that we're in, of really being the first generation that has really had choice to have kids that we have. I mean, even, my mom, like, I was born 37 years ago, it was still sort of just expected. Like, you got married and you had babies. It wasn't as much as, say, her mom's generation, but it was still there. Whereas now, so I've been questions of whether I would get married and have kids from when I was young. And so when I was like 15, 16 years old, I was adamant I would never, ever have children. I had no instinct for it. I didn't want it. I wanted a career. I was so vocal about this, to the point, even like around 19, I would always say, if I could have a hysterectomy, I would always be like, this uterus is dead weight. I don't need it. Now, from my perspective, fortunately, no doctor went, oh, cool, I'll just give you a hysterectomy right now. Off you go. And because it's also important to note that, the uterus, it has a function in the body that's it's just supposed to be there. So it's just, you shouldn't just go and have a hysterectomy just because you don't want kids, sort of thing. There are other avenues to stop that from happening. And so I'm all for, if women say they don't want to have kids, like, cool. And I honestly thought that was how I would go. And then at around 35, even 36, like a year ago, I was like, no, I actually do want to do this. And I'm now sitting here with a 7-week-old on my lap.
Yeah.
But it's the thing. Yeah, but it's the thing of, gosh, don't you want the people to be who are having kids to be the people who actually really want them? I think about it all the time at the moment. I am absolutely loving motherhood, and I love everything about it. But just now knowing a bit of what it is, I wouldn't have liked it 5 years ago. I wouldn't have felt that I was mentally, emotionally, professionally in the position to. I have work that I'm very lucky, I can still do it while doing this, because a lot of my work I can do from home. Yeah. So I haven't really had to give up that side of myself. But there are a lot of women that do have to give up that professional side of themselves still. It's just the reality. There's just no other way of looking at it. You cannot have a high-powered, full-time profession and be a full-time mother, like there with your baby at the same time. For the most part, it's just impossible, because there's only 24 hours in a day. You can't physically do two things at once. No. And so it's something really that you have to, you have to make choices about, and you've got to take time out of your career, all different things. So it's not an easy, it's not an easy thing to deal with in general. Like, men just don't have that, because it, in part because you're not expected, you're not required to be at home 24/7, because your bodies don't feed the baby. Like, that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So
well, it's kind of more that, because now, I want to talk about the ideological side of thing, and I suppose that this is a great conversation, incidentally, because it's helping me coalesce some of the inarticulate feeling into my head. No, seriously, like, I'm not kidding. And I think that, going back to what we were saying before, it's not so much romanticizing the past, because, like, I don't either. But what I would like to see, and what I think one of the answers, part of this answer, the solution to this problem, would be to tell the truth. Is to go, look, there is this pattern of reality. You are a female. You're going to want to, like right now, you might kind of think, you want to be an astronaut, and you're not even kind of like even slightly interested in this, but you will probably not be a completely fulfilled human being until you do this.
Well, no, I wouldn't say a completely fulfilled human being, because I felt
A completely fulfilled woman.
No, let's see, because I've actually had these discussions with my boyfriend as well, because he has actually asked me, do I feel like I'm a fulfilled woman now, like now that I've experienced pregnancy and childbirth and now motherhood? And no, I actually feel no different, to be honest. I really don't. I just feel like it's
different to
opened
what you were
up.
saying. Like,
But I feel I'm happy that I've done it, but I don't feel that like it has, that I would be a lesser woman, or have a lesser experience in life had I not done it. Because if I didn't want to, and I was forced to do it, or I even just felt like I had to do it out of obligation, that wouldn't be fulfilling. I have one of my really close friends. She's my age. Like I've got a friendship group. There's 4 of us, and 3 of us have kids, and 1 doesn't. And she has zero interest in it. She has nieces, nephews, and then friends with babies, and that is plenty for her. She just doesn't. It's just not there. And when you're with it, you can tell. You're like, I don't think she'd be good at it. Like she's just the most awesome person, but she it's just not, it's something that interests her. And the idea that like 50 years ago she wouldn't have had this choice is, that's horrible.
again, I don't want to take the choice away from anyone. That's not what I'm arguing. In fact, I would fight very hard to prevent that from happening. But I'd kind of like the conceptual framework to change.
I think
you need to consider this. You need to consider that, and look, I'll use the example of my wife, and although she's actually within reach, so I'm going to have to like be very careful with this. She was considered herself like a very unmaternal person. I don't want to touch babies. I don't know what to do, blah, 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 blah. I'm just not maternal, kind of not interested in that. And like the moment she got pregnant, like this deep switch flicked in her. It's just like, and she became, and like, I'm not just saying this because she's here, she became the most incredible mother, wife ever. It wasn't a different person, but there was this different aspect. There were parts of her that she didn't know that were there, and she would have never known that were there unless she did that. So, I mean, my kind of argument is like, I totally accept everything you just said, that this person only, but like, I mean, would she? I mean,
no, because I think you've like the framework of what you're saying is sort of coming from the wrong angle. Like why she was like is so brilliant at it is not just because she did it, and it's because she was able to do it when she wanted to.
Okay.
And so like, if you're a woman and it never happens for you because you don't want to, it's not like you go like, oh, you would be someone else going, oh, you would be great at this, you should do it. It's like, if she doesn't want to do it, she's not going to be great at it. I wouldn't have been a great mother 10 years ago. I had a boyfriend 10 years ago. He really wanted to have kids, and I would not do it. So yeah, I was 27. I was at the beginning of my career. I was so resentful of him for sort of putting the pressure on me, and obviously the relationship ended. And 10 years later, I'm in a different position in my life. But if I didn't have, and even if I didn't have like my work outlet every day, like even sitting here having this conversation is part of my work, and it's an outlet for me.
Yeah, I suppose.
I wouldn't be as satisfied in the role. If my life was only motherhood, I would go insane.
Okay. All right. I think we have now solved that problem.